Red Bull didn't just lose performance, they lost an entire second per lap, and now the failure behind the RB22 is being exposed, and it points straight to a massive mistake at the heart of the team. Because this car isn't just slow. It's up to 20 kilograms overweight. It has broken balance. And worst of all, the data used to build it doesn't match reality. Max Verstappen called it impossible to drive. A rookie from their own junior team knocked him out in qualifying. And a car that once dominated Formula 1 is now fighting just to stay in the top 10. This isn't a setback. This is a technical failure at the highest level. And what you're about to hear reveals how one decision, one direction, may have caused the most shocking collapse Red Bull has ever faced. At first, nobody inside Red Bull believed it was real. 1 second. That number didn't make sense. Not for a team that dominated the sport. Not for a car designed to lead a new era. Because in Formula 1, you don't lose 1 second overnight. You lose tenths. You lose small margins. But 1 full second? That's something much deeper. And that's exactly what confused the team in those first moments. Because when the RB22 hit the track, the data said it should be competitive. The simulation said it was fast. Everything inside the system pointed in the right direction. But the stopwatch said the opposite. And that's where the first cracks appeared. Because engineers started comparing numbers. Sector by sector. Corner by corner. Trying to understand where the time was going. And what they found made things worse. The loss wasn't coming from one area. It was everywhere. Braking zones. Mid-corner. Exit traction. Straights. The car wasn't just weak in one phase. It was consistently slow in all of them. And that's when the first uncomfortable question appeared. What if the problem is not a detail? What if it's the entire car? Because when performance is missing everywhere, you're not dealing with a setup issue. You're dealing with a concept problem. And that realization is one of the most dangerous moments for any Formula 1 team. Because once you question the concept, everything else becomes uncertain. Every upgrade, every solution, every direction. And that's exactly what started happening inside Red Bull. Because the more they looked, the more they saw something they couldn't ignore. The RB22 was not behaving like the car they designed. Not even close. And that leads to a very specific type of failure. Not mechanical. Not operational. A correlation failure. The car in the simulation is not the car on track. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not improving a car. You're chasing something that doesn't exist. Every upgrade is based on a model. But if the model is wrong, every upgrade is a gamble. And that's exactly what Red Bull walked into, without realizing it. At first. Because early on, they still trusted the system. They believed the issue could be tuned out, adjusted, fixed through setup. But race after race, that belief started to disappear. Because nothing worked consistently. One session, the car felt slightly better. Next session, it was worse again. And that inconsistency is the biggest warning sign of all. Because a fast car can be difficult. A slow car can be predictable. But a car that changes behavior constantly is almost impossible to fix. And that's exactly what Verstappen was dealing with. Corner entry, understeer. Mid-corner, instability. Exit, unpredictable traction. And at high speed, a sudden shift in balance that no driver can anticipate. That's not just uncomfortable. That's unmanageable. And when the driver loses confidence, performance collapses even further. Because now, they can't push. They can't commit. They can't extract the limit. And that creates a vicious cycle. The car feels bad. The driver holds back. The lap time gets worse. The data becomes less reliable. And the engineers lose clarity. And this is where the failure becomes complete. Because now, you don't just have a slow car. You have a system that can't correct itself. And that's what makes this situation so critical. Because normally, a Formula 1 team fixes problems step by step. Identify the issue. Test a solution. Measure the result. Repeat. But here, that process is broken. Because the feedback loop doesn't work. The tools say one thing. Reality says another. And the gap between those two keeps growing. And that's where Pierre Waché's role becomes unavoidable. Because as technical director, he doesn't just oversee the car. He defines the direction. He decides what the team trusts. What the team builds. What the team believes. And right now, that belief has been shaken. Because this is the first car built fully under his leadership. The first real test, without Adrian Newey guiding the concept. And the result is a car that doesn't correlate, doesn't respond, doesn't perform. And inside the team, that raises questions. Not publicly, but internally, quietly. about decisions, about direction, about whether the foundation itself was wrong from the start. And that's where the pressure begins to rise. Because in Formula One, you can survive being slow. You can survive a bad race. But you cannot survive losing understanding. Because once you don't understand your own car, you lose control of everything. Development, performance, future direction, all of it. And that's exactly where Red Bull finds itself now. Trying to fix a car without fully understanding it. Trying to recover performance without trusting the tools that created it. And that leads to one inevitable outcome. A drastic decision. Not small changes. Not gradual fixes. A complete shift in direction. But that decision comes with a risk. A massive one. Because when you abandon your system, you're not just fixing a problem. You're starting again. In the middle of the season. Against teams that are already ahead. And that's what makes the next move so critical. Because what Waché does next won't just define the RB22. It will define his future at Red Bull. And that's exactly where Pierre Waché made the decision that now defines this entire crisis. Because once Red Bull accepted that the data was wrong, they had two options. Fix the tools, or ignore them. Fixing the tools takes years. New infrastructure, new wind tunnel, new correlation models. That doesn't happen mid-season. So Waché chose the only path available. Trust the track. Not the simulation. Not the wind tunnel. Reality. And that sounds logical. It sounds necessary. But in Formula One, it's extremely dangerous. Because now, every decision is based on limited data. 3 races. A few practice sessions. That's all they have to rebuild an entire concept. And from that, they started creating a new direction. A different RB22. One built around what the car actually does, not what it was supposed to do. That means changing everything. Weight distribution. Aerodynamic balance. Suspension behavior. Even how the car generates downforce at different speeds. And this is where the real risk begins. Because when you change everything at once, you lose control over cause and effect. If the car improves, you don't know why. If it gets worse, you don't know what caused it. And that makes development unpredictable. But Red Bull had no choice. Because staying on the original path was no longer an option. That path was already failing. So Waché pushed for the most aggressive reset on the grid. A full upgrade package. Not incremental. Not cautious. Massive. A new floor. Redesigned aerodynamic channels. Reworked suspension geometry. Weight reduction across the entire chassis. A completely revised cooling system. All arriving together. All depending on one thing. Working. Because if it doesn't, there is no time to go back. And that's what makes this moment so critical. Because this isn't just an upgrade. It's a gamble. The kind of gamble teams avoid. But Red Bull is forced to take. And inside the team, that decision didn't come without tension. Because not everyone agreed. Some engineers believed the real issue is still the wind tunnel. That no matter what changes you make, the same problems will return until that is fixed. Others believe the concept itself is flawed. That the RB22 was built on incorrect assumptions. And needs a complete redesign beyond what's even possible this season. And that division is a problem on its own. Because in Formula One, unity drives performance. And doubt slows everything down. So now Red Bull is not just fighting the stopwatch. They're fighting internal uncertainty. Different opinions. Different directions. All trying to solve the same crisis. And all of it points back to one person. Pierre Waché. Because this is his call. His direction. His responsibility. And right now, he's under more pressure than anyone else in the paddock. Because this isn't just about performance anymore. It's about credibility. Because before the season, he believed the new regulations would solve their limitations. That starting fresh would eliminate old problems. But the opposite happened. The problems didn't disappear. They multiplied. And that's what makes this situation so serious. Because it shows a miscalculation. At the highest level of engineering. Not a small error. A fundamental one. And now, everything leads to one moment. Miami. The first real test of this new direction. The first time the RB22 appears in its new form. Lighter. Rebalanced. Reimagined. And for the first time, aligned with what the track actually demands. But here's the truth. Even if it works, even if the car improves, that doesn't guarantee a comeback. Because the gap is too big. 1 second. That's not something you recover instantly. That takes time. Consistency. Confidence. And right now, Red Bull has none of those. So Miami becomes something much bigger than a race. It becomes a verdict. On the car, on the concept, on the decision, and on Pierre Waché himself. Because if this gamble works, he saves everything. The project, the direction, his position inside the team. But if it fails, there's no hiding, no excuses, no second reset, just one conclusion: that the RB22 was not just a mistake, but the beginning of something much worse. And this is where the situation becomes irreversible. Because after Miami, there is no reset left, no second rebuild, no hidden solution waiting in the background. Everything Red Bull has is already on the table. And that means one thing: if the RB22 is still fundamentally flawed, then the season is already lost. Not mathematically, but technically. Because in Formula 1, you can recover performance. You can find tenths, but you cannot rebuild an entire concept while racing. And that's the reality Red Bull is facing right now. Because even if the upgrades work, even if they remove the weight, even if they fix the balance, there's still one problem that doesn't disappear: the wind tunnel. The same 60-year-old system, still feeding data into development. And that means the risk never fully goes away, because every future upgrade still passes through a tool that doesn't fully match reality. So even progress comes with uncertainty. And that's something their rivals don't have. Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, they trust their tools. They know when an upgrade will work. They know what to expect. Red Bull doesn't. And that changes the entire dynamic of the season. Because now, they're not just chasing performance. They're chasing understanding, trying to rebuild confidence in a system that already failed them. And that's a much bigger challenge. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because this isn't just about 2026. This affects the future. Because Formula 1 doesn't stop. Teams are already working on the next car, the next concept, the next evolution.